Welcome back, everyone. Get ready, because today we're diving into a topic that's, well, it's pretty mind-blowing how genes can actually shape behavior.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you think about it, these tiny bits of code dictating actions and instincts.
Exactly. We'll be
Yeah.
looking at some seriously wild examples that, well, let's just say they might change how you view evolution.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
We're talking creatures with seemingly complex behaviors that are all thanks to, well, their genes.
Like this little King Kong midge from Taiwan, the scientist was studying them and got over 300 bites, most in places he couldn't even see.
Ouch. That's dedication to science, I guess.
But it makes you wonder, right? Is this tiny insect actually choosing those hard-to-reach spots? Like, is it that clever?
Well, that's where evolution comes in. It's like an arms race, you know?
Yeah.
Just like stick insects evolved camouflage, this midge's biting behavior is likely shaped by natural selection over generations.
So biting in those hidden spots means more meals, better survival, and passing on those genes?
Exactly. And it creates this illusion of intelligence, even in a creature as small as a midge.
It's wild, isn't it? Okay, ready for something even creepier. Enter the cordyceps fungus. Seriously. It's like something out of a sci-fi horror film.
Oh yeah, cordyceps is a classic example of nature's, well, its darker side. It infects ants, and get this, it makes them climb to a high point, bite down, and basically die in this fixed position.
Like it controls their brains. But how? I mean, a fungus doesn't even have a brain itself, right?
You're telling me. It's one of those things that makes you question everything you thought you knew. Somehow, this fungus manipulates the ant's nervous system to benefit its own reproduction.
So the ant basically becomes a puppet for the fungus to spread its spores.
Precisely. And it's not just ants, by the way. Scientists have seen similar things in flies, so this manipulation isn't a fluke. It's a testament to how powerful evolution can be.
It's terrifying, but also kind of brilliant. Okay, to really dive deep into this connection between genes, behavior, and evolution, we need to talk about a pioneer, Seymour Benzer. Imagine going from building bombs to studying fruit flies. Talk about a career change.
Yeah, Bender's story is incredible. He started as a physicist, but then he got fascinated by the mysteries of heredity and the genetic code.
So he went from the world of physics to the world of genetics. That's a big leap.
It was. But Benzer was a visionary. He had this radical idea to use fruit flies to study the genetic basis of behavior.
But back then, many scientists didn't even believe behavior could be influenced by genes.
Yeah, it was a pretty controversial idea at the time, but Benzer wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. He knew there had to be a connection.
So how did he prove them wrong? Like, how do you even begin to study the genetics of behavior?
Well, he designed these ingenious experiments. He would induce mutations in flies and then look for changes in their behavior. For instance, he found mutations that altered how flies responded to light.
Ah, so by changing their genes, he could actually change how they acted.
Exactly. And it was groundbreaking stuff. It proved that changes in specific genes could lead to predictable and heritable differences in behavior.
So he was basically creating flies that were genetically predisposed to act in certain ways. That's amazing. This leads us to one of the most remarkable discoveries from Benzer's lab, the period gene. His graduate student, Ron Konopka, noticed some flies had these really weird daily rhythms.
Oh yeah, Konopka's work was crucial. Some flies were early birds, some were night owls, and some had, well, no rhythm at all. It was like their internal clocks were messed up.
And it all came down to this one gene, the period gene.
It was a game changer. It was the first time a gene had been directly linked to a complex behavioral rhythm. It showed that even something as fundamental as our daily rhythms could be influenced by genetics.
And here's the kicker. The period gene acts as a kind of internal clock within cells. And get this, the same mechanism exists in humans.
I know, right? It's incredible. So whether you're a morning person or a night owl, it's partly due to this gene that was first discovered in fruit flies.
So from a tiny fly to us, it's amazing to see these connections across the animal kingdom. Okay, ready for another fascinating gene? This one's all about sex, or more specifically, sexual preference in flies. Prepare to be amazed by the fruitless gene.
Oh yeah, the fruitless gene is a wild one. It's a transcription factor, which basically means it controls the expression of other genes. And what's really cool is that Different versions of the fruitless protein are produced in males and females.
So different versions of this gene lead to different behaviors in males and females.
You got it. And these differences in behavior are pretty dramatic. We're talking about the entire courtship ritual, how flies approach each other, how they signal their interest, all of it.
So a single gene can actually determine whether a fly acts like a male or a female during courtship. That's incredible.
It is. And it gets even weirder. Scientists did this crazy experiment where they engineered female flies to express the male version of the fruitless gene.
Wait, so they basically flipped the switch. What happened?
Well, these females started behaving like males during courtship. They were trying to court other females, doing all the typical male courtship behaviors.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. It's like they completely reprogrammed their behavior by changing that one gene.
It really highlights the power of genes to shape even the most complex social interactions. And it makes you wonder, if a single gene can have such a dramatic effect, how do we explain the complexity of most behavioral traits?
That's a great question. Like, shouldn't there be a gene for aggression or a gene for intelligence?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. It turns out it's not quite that simple. Most behaviors are influenced by multiple genes, all interacting with each other and with the environment.
Ah, so it's more like a complex network of genes all working together.
Exactly. It's not just one gene, one behavior. It's a whole orchestra of genes playing together to create this symphony of behavior.
That makes sense. So while single genes can have a big impact, the bigger picture is much more complex.
Absolutely. And it highlights the incredible challenge of understanding the genetic basis of behavior. But hey, that's what makes this field so exciting, right? There's always more to discover.
I completely agree. This is all so fascinating. We've covered a lot of ground already, from blood-sucking midges to mind-controlling fungi to the groundbreaking work of Seymour Benzer.
And we're just getting started. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore even more amazing examples of how evolution has shaped behavior, challenging our understanding of the relationship between genes and the brain. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into genes and behavior. So much cool stuff to unpack.
Yeah, we're just getting started.
You know, I keep thinking about that white rabbit gene, the one linked to alcohol tolerance in flies. It's crazy that a gene involved in the cellular skeleton, the structure of the cell, could have anything to do with how much alcohol a fly can handle.
Right. It's one of those things that make you go, huh, how did that happen?
Exactly. Like, what's the connection there?
Well, it really highlights how complex the relationship between genes and behavior can be. We can't always predict how a gene will affect behavior just by looking at its basic function.
Like, we can't just assume that a gene that's involved in building cells will only affect, cell stuff.
Right. Sometimes those genes can have these ripple effects influencing processes that seem completely unrelated.
Alcohol tolerance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a great example of how much we still have to learn about the intricate workings of genes and how they shape who we are.
It's amazing and kind of humbling, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely keeps us on our toes as scientists.
Speaking of uncovering things, you mentioned algorithmic function in the last part. Can you remind me what that is again?
Sure. Algorithmic function is basically how genes guide the ongoing operation of our bodies, not just our development.
Okay, so it's like the difference between building a house and, keeping the lights on and the water running.
Exactly. Algorithmic growth is like the blueprint for building the house, while algorithmic function is like the operating manual that keeps everything running smoothly.
Ah, that makes sense. So just like problems with the blueprint can lead to structural issues in the house, mutations in genes involved in algorithmic function can disrupt those essential processes.
Precisely. And those disruptions can manifest as changes in behavior.
So the white rabbit gene, since it's involved in the cellular skeleton, which is part of the cell's ongoing maintenance, a mutation there could mess things up in a way that affects how the fly reacts to alcohol.
Right. It's like a domino effect. One small change can trigger a cascade of consequences, leading to unexpected outcomes like altered alcohol sensitivity.
Fascinating. It's like those chain reaction machines you see online.
Yeah, kind of. But in this case, the machine is a living organism, and the chain reaction can affect something as complex as behavior.
So are scientists actually trying to manipulate these genes, to see if they can change behavior?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the hottest areas of research in neurogenetics right now. We've already seen some pretty amazing results.
Like what?
Well, remember the fruitless gene we talked about?
The one that controls courtship behavior in flies?
Yeah, that one. Scientists have been able to manipulate that gene to create female flies that exhibit male courtship behaviors.
What? So they basically made the females act like males just by tweaking their genes?
Exactly. And it's not just flies. Researchers are exploring similar techniques in other animals, too.
It's like science fiction come to life. But I imagine there are some serious ethical considerations with this kind of research, right?
You're absolutely right. The ability to manipulate genes and potentially influence behavior raises all sorts of ethical questions.
Like, where do we draw the line? What's acceptable and what's not?
Exactly. As our understanding of the genetic basis of behavior grows, so too does our responsibility to use that knowledge wisely and ethically.
It's a heavy topic, but it's important to talk about. This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the incredible complexity of life.
Yeah, me too. It's both awe-inspiring and a little bit daunting to think about the power we have to understand and potentially manipulate the very building blocks of behavior.
So where do we go from here? What are the next steps in this field?
Well, I think the most important thing is to continue exploring these questions with curiosity and a healthy dose of caution. We need to keep pushing the boundaries of our understanding while always being mindful of the ethical implications of our work.
That's a great point. This journey is just beginning, and it's important that we navigate it thoughtfully and responsibly. Okay, so we've talked about how evolution has shaped behavior through, changes in genes, influencing how organisms are built and how they function. But I'm kind of curious, have scientists ever tried to, deliberately reprogram behavior by actually manipulating genes?
That's a really great question, and it takes us to the cutting edge of research, In neurogenetics and synthetic biology, scientists are definitely exploring ways to modify genes to influence behavior, both in animals and in the lab.
So, are they trying to create, I don't know, super soldiers or designer pets or something?
Not quite like in the sci-fi movies, but the possibilities are definitely intriguing. For instance, researchers have used gene editing techniques to alter the fruitless gene in flies, creating females that exhibit, get this, male courtship behaviors.
Wow, that's crazy. So they're rewriting the script for how animals behave.
It's pretty amazing, right? It shows just how much control genes can have over complex social interactions.
But I imagine there are some ethical concerns with this kind of research, right? Especially when we start thinking about, humans.
Oh, absolutely. As we gain the ability to manipulate genes and potentially influence behavior, we need to proceed very carefully and have some serious discussions about the ethical implications. The research on simpler organisms provides a glimpse into the power and complexity of the gene-behavior relationship. But translating that knowledge to humans is a whole other ballgame.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? If we can change a fly's courtship ritual by tweaking a single gene, what does that mean for understanding and, potentially influencing human behavior?
It's a question that deserves careful consideration as we navigate this this exciting but rapidly evolving field.
This whole deep dive has been incredible. It's amazing to think about how evolution has shaped the behavior of all living things, from tiny midges to complex humans.
What's really remarkable is that we're living in a time when we can not only observe these evolutionary marvels, but also begin to, unravel the molecular mechanisms behind them. The field of neurogenetics is advancing rapidly, and with each new discovery, we gain a deeper appreciation for the intricate dance between genes, brains, and behavior.
It's both exciting and, a bit daunting to realize the power of genes to influence who we are and how we act.
Absolutely. And as we continue to explore the genetic basis of behavior, we're bound to uncover even more, surprising and thought-provoking insights.
I'm walking away from this with a sense of awe and a healthy dose of caution. It's been an incredible journey.
It really has. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of genes and behavior.
And to all our listeners out there, keep those minds curious and never stop exploring the wonders of science.